I remember meeting this woman and she was like, oh my God, Jamaica looks so lovely. I can't wait to go. I'm gonna wait till the war is over.
The hoops?
Honestly, the haters can hate. Just let the creators create and let the creator be judged. I mean, too many mistakes to be grudging. Besides, all of us lost without love. Cause maybe some never get woke, or tired of staying awake, or party all night, then distraught at the state of the day.
Hi everyone, I'm Stacey Lee Kong, and this is Friday Talks Not Bad for Some Immigrants, a video series about the immigrant experience and what that even means. Today, I'm here with musician and actor Mark Clennon, whose most recent project is the feature film I Don't Know Who You Are, which premiered at TIFF 2023. Mark, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Stacey.
So first, I know that you left Jamaica as a teenager. You were 15, right? So when I left Trinidad, I was 4, which is a very different life stage. Like, the adjustment period is different. What was it like to be that age and leave?
It was exciting because I was going to a new country and I was, going somewhere else. But it was also sad because I was, going to leave my friends, and there was a lot of the insecurity of like, what will it be? Will I like it? Will it be fun? Will it not be fun? But in hindsight, I think it was a perfect age to leave Jamaica because I feel like because of when I left Jamaica, I have a very idealistic version of Jamaica in my head.
Right.
Whereas when I go to Jamaica and I'm like talking to my family, I'm like, isn't this place lovely? They're like, what? They're like,
excuse me? Have you been to the grocery store?
I'm like, it's utopia. They're like, it's not. But I think when you leave a country at 15, that's like the stamp that it leaves on you, which is why I think I'm so proud of my culture. I mean, I think I'd be proud regardless of when I left, but I think I'm particularly proud because I've never lived there as an adult and had to maybe go through some of the more, conventional hardships.
So many of the conversations that we have about immigration is like, you're leaving for a better life. And so I was wondering if you had any complicated feelings, because by the time you're 15, I imagine you had already kind of understood your sexuality, you understood the homophobia that happens in Jamaica, which happens in so many island countries. And so I wondered if there was any feeling of relief or like, if you had ideas about what your life could be outside of Jamaica.
Definitely. I remember just feeling excited about living somewhere where I would be accepted and, normal, quote unquote. So yeah, definitely it was complicated. But I think it speaks to just how complicated being an immigrant is, because no matter how tough the issues are where you're coming from, it's your home, it's your identity, and it's who you are. And I think even though I knew that I was gonna have a better life in another country regarding my sexuality, I still loved where I was from and I had a great life, I had a great family. But yeah, definitely I was looking forward to moving to Florida and trying to understand what that meant. So yeah, you're right, it is a very complicated transition.
I think about that in the context of, like, in Trinidad, I couldn't have the career that I have. I couldn't have the life that I have. Like, I'm a whole 38, and when we go to Trinidad, my mom is like, well, you can't go anywhere by yourself, right? Like, I could not live the life I live here. But at the same time, here, I'm not surrounded by people who understand me, who understand my values, the food is different, like all of these things that we rely on. So that idea of you have 2 homes, but neither one is quite complete, maybe?
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's wild. So like on that note, what was it like to adjust to Florida? Like, did it live up to the expectations of what you thought it would be?
No.
Hard no.
I'm kidding.
Tell me why.
I mean, Florida's a great place, and my family still lives there. My mom's still in Florida, and that's technically my home when I go to see my family there in Florida. So, a lot of good memories there. I went to high school there, a lot of high school friends. But I think when people think about Florida, they think of the glamour of like Miami.
Yes.
And everyone is like, oh my God, you're from Florida? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, wow, that must have been so cool. I'm like, what? Where? But I grew up in Boynton Beach, which is...
I don't even know where that is.
Yeah. Boynton Beach is like the Oakville of Florida.
Yo!
But not even...
I'm only saying it like that because I am from Oakville.
You're from Oakville?
That's where I grew up, so that is
I loved it. I'm kidding.
No, that's a very good...
Really?
That's a very evocative description.
I love how I'm like
Let's leave it at
shading your
that.
hometown, but...
It's all right. It's all right. No, but I
Yeah.
get that because I also think when you're from the Caribbean, and maybe other places, but like that's where I'm from. When you're from the Caribbean, it's like you have this idea of America. You have this idea of what it means to go
For sure.
live in America. And then you get there and you're like, this is kind of regular.
Yeah, for sure.
It's just... like, there are different things, sure.
Yeah.
And even, I guess the other thing I was thinking of that with that question too is, we idealize these places, but when we get there, it's not like there's no flaws. It's not like there's no discrimination or there's no poverty or there's no hardship. Like, I think when we are thinking about building a better life, we don't think about what it's going to take to build that better life.
Absolutely. And I think for me in that case, it was actually very complicated because I was moving from a place that was very homophobic to a place that was slightly less homophobic. But on top of that, I left a predominantly Black country to a place that had a very, complicated relationship with race, like Florida. So on the one hand, it was definitely better, and I'm grateful for the time. But on the other hand, it was definitely a lot more to adjust to. And I'll never forget my mom, when I first moved to Florida, she sat me down for like the birds and the bees talk, but it wasn't about birds and the bees. She was like, if you get pulled over by the cops, just shut up and just keep quiet. Like, my mom literally told me, she was like, this is not Kingston. She was like, you don't know anyone here. There's no one to call. We're on our own. So like, be behaved. And so that was definitely an adjustment coming from Jamaica, where my family has lived there for millennia, not millennia, but like hundreds, a long time,
like,
right? Yeah. And so like, there's a lot of connectivity and like a lot of like social, like if you need help, you call people, like, you have people to lean on. Whereas as an immigrant, if you fall into trouble, you're kind of on your own. So on one hand, it was great to move to America, and I'm grateful and was exciting. On the other hand, it was definitely a little rough in some ways.
And then, okay, tell me about coming to Canada. And then that happened.
No, listen, having lived in the US, having lived in Canada, I will definitely choose Canada over the US any day, just because the entire time I lived in America, I never felt that there was even a remote possibility that I could be American. I was always Jamaican and an outsider, whereas, Canada is 100% of, has flaws for sure, but I very quickly felt like I could belong here, and I started meeting people from all over the world who were Canadian and felt like they were part of the community, and I had never felt that before. And on many of the issues that are important to me, whether it's diversity, LGBT rights, Canada offered more for me. I would say it was an adjustment, and I definitely had to like start from the ground up and like, go through some normal growing pains as an immigrant, but I definitely liked it better.
Yeah. So you came here partially to pursue your career too, right? Or to pursue your career. So when you were thinking about that, and especially when you were deciding to pursue music, how much did you decide about what you would share of yourself? Because I feel like we all talk about personal brands, although really we're talking about professional brands. But when you're thinking of who you're going to be, especially when you don't necessarily have a community here, like you don't have people to rely on, you don't have people who have known your family for generations, how open do you decide to be?
I think it's one of those things too, where I think when you're younger, your needs and your motivations are like not survival, but you just want to like exist and like be and fit in. Whereas as you get older, you develop a sense of self. You understand what's important to you. For me, there came a time in my life where my sexuality and my identity was never something when I was younger that was like a driving force. Like I would never show up to a place and be like, this is who I am. I just was whatever. Whereas I think just a lot of things that were happening in the world and a lot of things that I was seeing, it just made me so much more passionate about representing myself in an authentic ways and truly and fully. It was one. It wasn't two separate things. It was just like, this is who I am. And I also just became more confident, because when I was younger, I was very shy and like afraid of, what are they gonna say? Are they gonna judge me? And yeah.
And now you're like, they might.
They might, but oh well.
Exactly. So then tell me about going back to Jamaica to film the video for Kingston, because that is like it is both a beautiful creative statement, but also quite a strong political statement.
First of all, I'm so blessed to have an amazing support team in terms of my family and the people that I worked with on this project. And the experience for me was great because I had people around me who understood the significance of what we were doing and wanted to help. And there were so many people in Jamaica that had found out about the project and were like, I don't care if the song is good or bad. I don't care, but like, just like, how can we help? So that was really helpful to get it done.
Yeah.
There were definitely some moments where, it's hard to explain, but it's a completely different universe. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many normal things you would do in Toronto
that you could not,
that no one would care about. You would not even bat an eyelid, whatever. Whereas in Jamaica, it would cause like a bit of a stir. And something as simple as the one of the scenes in the video, I'm riding on the back of a bike with my co-star, and I feel like you've seen two men on a bike in Toronto and you don't think
you
about
don't think
it.
anything of it.
Yeah. Whereas in Jamaica, it's such a homophobic country that something as simple as two men on a bike could potentially gather some looks or whatever. So we had to be very strategic in where we shot. But there was one scene where we were shooting and we had a car behind us to like block everything off. And a car managed to break through and like come around. And at this point I had my arms around my co-star.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, this is like,
This is how it ends,
they're gonna run me off the street. And it's so funny because I remember feeling terrified and my blood going cold because I'm like, the people in this car are witnessing. I mean, we weren't making out or anything, but like having your arms around someone.
Yes, is a signal.
Pretty,
right.
Yeah. And I kind of froze and the car drove past us and I looked over and it was a girl and it was two girls, one in another seat, and they smiled and kept going. And I was like, oh my God. And I think that was like a really cool moment of like, not affirmation because they probably were just like, that's weird.
Or they may have been like, guys, you're so slow. Yeah. Like, I'm late, let's go.
Yeah, they were in a bit of a hurry. But yeah, that moment was very cool to just sort of give me a bit more confidence to like go for it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it definitely is a more challenging experience to film a project of that nature in, but here we are.
But here we are.
Yeah.
And like, to be clear, because I realized I didn't say it in the question, this was the first music video featuring two male romantic leads in a music video shot in Jamaica. Like, it is a big deal.
Yeah.
It really is.
I mean, unfortunately, the bar is set so low that
Okay,
like...
fair. The bar is in the basement, but
yeah.
And it's wild that it took until 2022. But the fact, I can see the power of it just being a normal moment. Like, the power of being like, oh, we just were annoying them because we were slow, as opposed to like, oh, my life is in danger. Like, that's a switch.
Yeah, which is so crazy because I think even though I'm Jamaican and I was born and raised there and I go back often, I think that I still have a lot of, for good reason, I have a lot of anxiety about how homophobic Jamaica is, but I'm often surprised by little moments where things will be said or done and it just blows my mind that, you know, like an example of this is when I was in Jamaica the last time, I met someone, this is after the video came out, and they were like, oh my God, you're on Instagram. And I was like, yeah, so we added each other on Instagram. And in front of me, they pulled up my Instagram and they're going through and they saw that they were watching the video in front of me. And I was like—
stressful for many reasons, actually.
Yeah.
But yes, carry on.
And I don't know what I imagined would happen. I don't know if I thought they were gonna be like, he's gay, everyone. Like, I don't know if that's what I thought.
Yes.
But they were like, oh my gosh, it's so cool. And I was like, trying to act like it was not a big deal. I'm like, yeah, of course. But in my mind, I'm like, what, you think this is cool? I have so many experiences in Jamaica all the time where, you know, again, not to minimize the homophobia because it is horrific, but at the same time, there are people in pockets that are so unbothered by it. And it's an interesting reminder when it happens.
I think that's an important reminder and like a nuanced conversation to have, because when we assume that our homelands are just this way, I think we're kind of selling people short.
For sure, yeah. Like Jamaica now has a very expansive LGBT network all across the island.
Yeah.
There's pride events, there's pride parade, not parades, one singular pride parade.
Yes.
Very different tone because it is a much more serious issue there than it is here. So it's not necessarily like a party. But yeah, when I was a kid growing up in Jamaica, you couldn't fathom anyone openly being gay because it was it would be such a bad thing.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's not, again, I'm not trying to minimize the difficulties that LGBT Jamaicans have, but the fact that you have active LGBT organizations that are hosting events and on television and giving interviews is tremendous, but it speaks to what you're saying. There's a lot of change happening in the worldwide media with, you know, television and music, and it slowly is seeping into our culture. And one of the motivations I had with Kingston is just, I think for Jamaicans, when we see LGBT people on television, it's great and it's amazing, but I think it's even more impactful when you see someone from your community that looks like you. And so I was just excited to hopefully add to that dialogue, and yeah.
Yeah, what I want to do in this conversation is not to undermine the real homophobia that still exists, but also to acknowledge people have been risking their lives and risking their reputations to do the work in Jamaica. Like those activists, the reason that we're seeing this progress is not just like Western value seeping in. I more
100%.
mean you're like seeing it happening elsewhere and you're feeling empowered to go and do the work in your own community. And like that, I think is really important.
100%. Yeah. And Jamaica has a very long history of LGBT activism. We just don't know about it. Even me as a gay person growing up in Jamaica, I just never knew. And then as I've gotten older and as I've started doing the work that I've done, people have been reaching out to me and like, have you read this book? Have you seen this thing or talked to that guy? And I'll speak to people and they'll tell me stories about like, yeah, in the 70s, we were doing this, in the 60s, in the 80s, and all throughout history when we didn't think there were any gay people in Jamaica.
Yeah.
Obviously there were, there always are.
But there's the story of no one could ever be gay. No one could publicly do this. And then you're like, but yeah.
They're there.
And they were also doing these amazing acts of activism. That's like a really lovely through line from this work from people that came before you to the work that you're doing now. Like that is a really nice through line that you were able to go home and sort of add to that conversation.
Yeah, and I wouldn't have had the confidence or bravery to do it if there weren't people who've done things before.
Yeah.
And this is the thing about this kind of work is really interesting is that like as an artist, I'm public facing, so I'll make a video like Kingston, which is the first quote unquote to do quote unquote, but there are so many people who did so many bigger things, but weren't in a music video. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's just interesting. Like it's almost like Kingston is like the mascot for the work of hundreds and thousands of people who do small little acts of bravery, and even again things that today you and I would think of as nothing crazy.
Yeah.
But in that time is like you did what? You went where? You said you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
when we talk about these like firsts and it's making history and like that is very cool. Although to our earlier point had to happen in 2022, but it's also like standing on the shoulders of giants in a way. Like even if those were tiny moments, it was really brave and it was really like meaningful to do. And you are part of that history.
Yeah. One thing I always often think about is Jamaica has a very strong history of activism going back to our colonial days as when we were enslaved. There were hundreds of slave rebellions that happened all over the island, and many of them were very effective and successful in helping us get to where we are today. And I think Jamaicans are not shy people. They say what they
Y'all
feel.
are really not, no.
Say what they feel, whatever they're upset about, they will take to the streets and, advocate for it. And I think that it's unfortunate that we need to do this for LGBT, rights and safety and inclusion. But I think, it's just our spirit. Like we just are a very tenacious group of people, and it's just kind of who we are.
And there's something very hopeful in that.
Yeah.
Okay, shifting gears a little bit, I want to talk about I Don't Know Who You Are. You received amazing reviews for playing Benjamin. What drew you to this project?
Honestly, first I would say M.H. Murray. He's an incredible director, and we were very blessed to work on the film before, Ghosts, the short film.
Yes.
And we had a really good time, and I just felt like he was someone that had a very strong vision for this film and someone who was just an amazing collaborator. So yeah, I just think through hearing him speak about the project and the script and just sort of being in the early stages, I got really excited about it. Definitely a bit daunting once I actually read the script and I was like, I'm doing what?
Right. So sorry, what?
Yeah. But it's been really cool to see the way that the film has been received. It's been really cool to just see that. And like I said, I've kind of turned off my acting brain for a while. So to have this film come out and get some good news, that's kind of exciting.
Yeah. And you had made the point that this was your first feature film. Like
First
this
feature.
it's a huge role to be your first thing, like your first big project like this, but also a huge reaction. Is it validating to get that kind of feedback?
Absolutely. I will tell you, as an artist, it's gonna sound so cocky, but as an artist, I know when I'm killing it. When you're doing something and you're like, I got this. I didn't have that feeling when we were shooting this movie. I felt like I was like, they're gonna fire me. Like I suck. On set, they would say great things. Like, that was great, but I didn't believe it. I was like, you're just being nice. You just stop it. Like, I'm a big boy, I can handle it. I don't know if that's imposter syndrome or my own confidence or just, I don't know what it was. But then when we found out about all of the festivals and TIFF and then Rising Stars and then that was one thing, but then I was like, okay, maybe they're being nice. Let me read the reviews and the comments, because people who are anonymous don't have to be as honest as people who are, film festivals. And I was reading some good reviews on Letterboxd and on social media, and I was like, oh my God, I guess this is great. And yeah, it just feels good to feel like you're not doing well, and then to see that you are being received well. It's a good sort of adjustment to make in your brain. And I'd rather that than the opposite, where I feel like, yeah.
I'm killing it, and everyone's like, I actually hated that.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about the types of stories that we usually see featuring immigrants, or the types of stories that we usually think of as immigrant stories, and how you think I Don't Know Who You Are fits into it.
I think that the immigrant experience is so complex because a lot of immigrants come from different places in the world with different language skills, different resources, and I can't speak to every immigrant experience, but I know what it feels like to come to a country and feel like an outsider and feel like you don't know anyone, you're starting from scratch. And I think one thing that I'm proud of as an immigrant myself, and as the actor who plays Benjamin, seeing what he's doing in this film, is the idea that like everything that Benjamin has, he got it, he made it. He wasn't given anything. And I think that that's something that a lot of immigrants, myself included, I feel very proud of that. Like I came to Canada with zero connections, zero resources. I had like, I don't remember how much money I had at the time, but it was nothing to like—
It wasn't a lot.
It wasn't a lot. I remember with my first apartment, I slept on a mattress for like the first year on the floor. But to me, it felt glamorous. I was like, I'm an artist.
What? Oh, okay. It was romantic.
Yeah.
You were like, oh, I'm an artist. This is the epitome of being an artist.
Exactly. But it's almost like my brain was like, frame it this way so you
Yeah,
don't
tell yourself
feel
this story.
bad about it.
Yeah.
But you know, that's very normal. And I think like I'm grateful that I had to go through that to make myself more appreciative for when I was able to have money and deck out my whole apartment with nice stuff. But yeah, as it pertains to Benjamin, you know, he is exactly that. Like everything you see that he has, mind you, he doesn't have much as the film states, but he was able to build a life for himself. And you're right, it's not specifically an immigrant story, but the reality is he is an immigrant or the child of immigrants.
So I think one of the things that I would love to see is a widening of what an immigrant story even means. Like instead of the same old tropes of someone came here from a poor country and they're striving for assimilation or striving for success, I want something more complex. And I'm curious if you think that creative industries in general are leaving space for that nuance when we talk about immigrants and immigrant stories and what it means to come here from somewhere else.
I think that we have a lot of great films reflecting the immigrant story, but I don't think we've really gone there and seen the full breadth of what's possible.
Yeah.
And I think to your point, there is a narrative about immigrants that is shaped by television and film. And I think, you know, I think there's a lot more to be said that we're not saying. Not only are there the socioeconomic challenges that you might face, but there's also the stigma and the ideas that people have. Like, I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with people about Jamaica where they'll say something and I'm like, that's not true, but I have to I'm like, oh, what, really?
Oh my God, why do you think that?
Yeah. I remember meeting this woman and she was like, oh my God, Jamaica looks so lovely. I can't wait to go. I'm gonna wait till the war is over.
The hoopst?
I'm like, there's a war? And I was like, just go with it. And I was like, I'm sorry, wait, what war? And I had to push and challenge, and she was like, isn't there like a war, you know, between this and that? I was like, no, there's not a war. There's violence for sure, and there's crime, but not a war. But I think, yeah, you're coming into it not as a blank slate. You're coming into it with the ideas that people are projecting onto you.
Absolutely.
And even on the issue of being like a gay Jamaican, I've definitely been through some things in my life and I've had to overcome a lot as an LGBT Jamaican, but I think we also have an idea of what that means. And, you know, I remember someone asking me if I lived in a gully, and I was like, I've never lived in a gully before, but they were like, I saw this Vice video about gully queens in Jamaica. And I was like, yeah, definitely not.
Did you have a moment where you were like, why would you ever feel comfortable asking me that question? Do you have any idea?
Yeah.
And also, what if you had?
Yeah.
Like, what is the point of what people project on you is such a good one. Because that is, I think, at the crux of what I'm talking about.
For sure, yeah. And you might think it's not a big deal because it's like, oh, they just have this idea, whatever, but these things are subconsciously present when you're going out for jobs, you're going on dates, you're just trying to interact and integrate into society. And, you know, people might just think that, oh, I'll hire him, but maybe he is more, you know what I mean? Like whatever that
They just have a
issue
notion
is,
about you.
They have a notion about
Yeah.
you, for sure. And I think, to your point, this is not something that is even across the board, because I think if you're coming from an island like Jamaica, which, you know, whether it's right or wrong, people have an idea about it, versus if you're an immigrant from New York City, it's a different story, right? And so I think these are things that immigrants have to overcome. However, I think that that's one thing that I'm excited about as a filmmaker and as an artist, is using my work to show that. And that's why with Kingston, I was very specific in not making it a video about homophobia and about violence and about, you know, something negative. I wanted it to be something hopeful. And so many people, after seeing the video, reached out and they were like, oh, what did I think it was gonna be? Like, they thought it was gonna be like being chased with like a machete and like a gun. But I'm like, yeah, that is Jamaica. Like, everything you saw in that video is a part of the LGBT experience, which is so complicated. You have a variety of experiences. So I think us as artists, we have a bit of a responsibility to help people reframe the narrative around our countries where we come from and around our experiences. And yeah, I hope that I Don't Know Who You Are is able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Also, the song Kingston, the vibe is not chased with machetes. Like, from a purely artistic perspective, that makes no sense.
Yeah.
Just for the record.
For sure. I also think it's when you have a limited understanding of a place, you go to these tropes or these ideas. And I think that, you know, Jamaica is a country that it's not an obscure country. It's very, you know, it's out there. But I think people still have these ideas based off of maybe television or music. And to be fair, we do, as a culture, project some of these images through our music that helps to probably reinforce some of the ideas that people have. But I think until you go to a place like Jamaica or Trinidad or India or China or wherever you go, you'll never really be able to understand it. While we can do a lot as artists to depict these countries through film, when you go there and you're meeting real people that are telling you things, like, for example, I was telling you earlier about the people in Jamaica who are not homophobic and are lovely and so open-minded. And until you go there and experience that, you'll just latch on to the Vice videos, which show you, you know what I mean?
Which show you just one narrow part of what it means to be in Jamaica or to be Jamaican. Tell me what's next for you. What do people need to look out for?
We're going to a few festivals next year to promote I Don't Know Who You Are. I Don't Know Who You Are will be in theaters next year in both Canada and the US, which I'm excited about. And so we're gonna do a lot of press surrounding that. And then for me, I am putting out my debut album next year, which I've been waiting my whole life to do this. And I've been doing like small EPs and small singles and things like that. So to have a whole record, I'm super excited, and a lot of stuff. We're going back to Jamaica to shoot some more videos, Kingston Part 2. That's not what it's called, but yeah.
That's the vibe, not the name.
That's the vibe, yeah.
Okay. Mark, thank you so much for this conversation. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, everyone, for watching. You know the drill. Like, comment, subscribe. If you'd like more Friday in your life, you can follow @_FridayThings on Instagram, and you can go to fridaythings.com/subscribe to sign up for the newsletter. Mark, where can people find you?
Mark_Clennon.
Amazing. Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Get it, got it, good. Get it, got it, good. Get it. Get it, got it, good. Get it, got it, good. Get it, got it, good. Get it, got it. I'm talking about ways we can elevate. Stepping up, staring, we escalate. Don't try to separate, we'll get together and celebrate. I can do everything, I just don't hesitate. I can do anything. Allow me to demonstrate. I just can't wait, I just cannot be me. I just can't go back and